Okay, is that better? Yeah, I think that's probably better. Man, how did I made it so far talking so much. I said so many things um, before anybody said anything. Well, okay, let me say this all again. So this is Office Hours. Welcome. If you've never done Office Hours before, that's what this is just your opportunity to ask me questions once a week. And yeah, it helps me put all the questions that I answer all at one time so I can give you better answers and also not context switch as much during the week. So I give priority to the people who are actually in the Zoom call, and you can feel free to join. If you don't want to join the Zoom call, that's fine as well. You can ask questions in the Discord, and we normally get through all the Zoom questions, and then I can get to the questions in the Discord. And sometimes they're both. So somebody will post it to the Discord, and then I'll be here in the Zoom call, and that's great too. So yeah, we've already got a couple of good questions in Discord. Oh yeah, also another thing I said when I was muted, I totally ignore YouTube comments or the live chat. So feel free to chat there. You're talking to yourself and to each other, I guess. Come to Discord. It's a better place. I can moderate it. So we don't have terrible people saying terrible things. It's just very difficult to moderate YouTube. Okay, and that's it. Who wants to ask the first question in Zoom?
Hi.
Hey, Peter.
So I would like to ask
Uh-oh,
about
I can't hear you. I think you can be heard. I think it's my problem. 1 second. There we go. Now I can hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I wanted to ask about the compound components. Because in the Epic React, you explain it in two ways, like with clone elements and with context. And I don't know why, like the clone element stuck in my mind, and I didn't like it. I was just wondering if you have any like practical use cases. Why would we want to like limit the compound components children to only one level? Like, do you have any examples?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'm going to remove the clone element in a future version of Epic React and of that workshop in general. It used to be more useful when context was clunky. So the best use case for this is when it wouldn't make sense for your components to be used in this way, to be doing any nesting. And an example of that is like React Router. They have the router, and then they have routes, and they have to be direct to children, right? So there's no way to nest these. Reach Route or Reach UI has a couple of things that are like this as well. I think not the combo box. Yeah, combo box. That actually is probably a bad example. Yeah, I feel like there's some where it's like, no, you shouldn't be putting a div between these or whatever. It just wouldn't make sense. So that's one situation where clone element kind of makes sense. But because context is so easy now, there's not really a strong argument for using clone element. So you could, in either case, you can enforce at runtime that you're only using the right children. And it doesn't give you any additional advantage to use clone element over context. Context just is, I don't know. Context kind of feels easier to me. I don't know. I'm still kind of on the fence, but I'm thinking
it feels like way more like compatible with Hook way of thinking for me.
Yeah. The only thing that I'm thinking where clone element is useful is in those situations where you're like, no, it doesn't make sense to put a div here or to nest this thing. The only time or like the nice thing about clone element is if you do, it doesn't work. And so you kind of enforce that people won't do it because it doesn't work otherwise. The problem with that though is if I say I want to have like a wrapper around your component for some reason, like I just have a common thing that I do a lot or something like that. Clone element, that won't work. Well, technically yeah, it'd probably work as long as you're accepting the right props, but it'd just be kind of confusing. You'd have to worry about remembering the props, and that kind of exposes the internal API. So yeah, I'm thinking that in a future version of Epic React and of that workshop in particular, I'll probably just remove clone element and get rid of and just do context entirely.
Okay, thanks for clarification.
Yeah, I would say that it can still be useful to have some sort of runtime check if you say, hey, it really just doesn't make sense to put it to nest this or anything like that. That could be useful potentially, although that does mean that if somebody wanted to wrap your component with their own, then you'd be toast there. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. For the router example, yeah, that might make sense.
Yeah, but I think it's probably fine. Okay. Is it Shaiwa? Is that how you say your name?
Yes.
Great.
Correct. I posted earlier on. I posted the question in the channel.
Yeah, I can answer this. I read it earlier.
Yes.
So the question is, I've got this dispatch. I'm assuming that's coming from use reducer. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're saying, hey, and actually, you know what? Let's just bring up just an example so that we can play around with some code here. So we'll go to, yeah, sure, we'll do here. So if we've got a use reducer, you know, some reducer here, and then we have a use effect, there we go. And we call dispatch with blah. You notice that I'm not getting a warning right here, even though I have dispatch in here. In your example, you're saying that ESLint is telling you that you need to have dispatch in there.
Yes.
And what's most likely happening is you've got this function that's like a use my thing, you know, some hook, and inside of that, you're calling use reducer, and then you're returning dispatch or state and dispatch. This is where that sort of thing typically happens. And state dispatch. Okay, so in this case, it's still not, well, it's because I have a syntax error. So let's just clean that up. There we go. And this is complaining for who knows. I don't know. This is probably a TypeScript something. Anyway, now I'm getting the warning. And it's saying, hey, this dispatch needs to be included. So that's what you're seeing, I believe. So the reason that you're getting the warning now that this is inside of a different function and you weren't before, is before React ESLint plugin could look at this and say, oh, you're using this dispatch, but I can see that that's coming from use reducer. Just statically, I can see that's where that is coming from. And I know, as the ESLint plugin author, I know that the dispatch function that comes from use reducer will never change. It's stable. And so therefore, we don't need to include it in the dependency array. But once you move that use reducer into a custom hook, now ESLint is just really limited on its ability to trace where code is coming from. And JavaScript is just super flexible. So it would be a fool's errand to try and make it work anyway. And so when ESLint sees this, it says, oh, you're using dispatch. Let me find where that's coming from. Oh, it's coming from this hook that I know nothing about. So I'm going to have to say, hey, this dispatch needs to be in the dependency array. So at the end of the day, it actually doesn't matter if you include dispatch right here, because dispatch will never change because it's coming directly from use reducer. This function is guaranteed to be stable for the lifetime of the component. So it doesn't make a difference whether you include the dispatch or not. And so that's why I always just say, follow the ESLint rule and most, like 99.999% of the time, you'll be fine. There's only like a very small fraction of the time where breaking the ESLint rule makes sense and is advisable, but yeah, like you probably won't ever run into that situation. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Great. So yeah, I was just curious to like, so if like, for instance, I have another, in that example, I have another function like join channel. It's being imported into the file where, but there is no complaint on the by the linter, like it's being imported.
Yeah.
And then
okay.
and then I got I'm using dispatch from use dispatch, actually, from not like React use dispatch.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
But then it doesn't complain about the imported function, but it complains about the thing that comes from use dispatch.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I was like, what's the understanding?
The reason that it doesn't complain about imports is because of the nature of just how JavaScript works. It's impossible for this value to change because imports are immutable. The binding to whatever they're referencing is immutable. So it's impossible for foo in this case to change. And so it actually won't cause any issues if you include it or don't include it. And in fact, if you do include it, then you'll get a warning that says outer scope values like foo aren't valid dependencies because mutating them doesn't re-render the, actually that's a different thing. Yeah, if it were to be mutated, it wouldn't re-render the component, and so then you're in trouble. But in our case, it can't be mutated, and so we don't need to bother including it. You'll have the same sort of thing if you have a use ref. And then you say ref here. It's not going to tell you that you need to include your ref because, in fact, if you try to, it's going to give you that same warning. It's saying mutable values like ref.current aren't valid dependencies because mutating them doesn't re-render the component. So what that's saying is you're telling me that whenever these things change, you want me to run this use effect callback. But when these things change, you're not re-rendering the component. So I can't know to run your use effect callback if these things were to change. And so you need to restructure your code. So in the case of an import, it's not even a concern anyway. You just totally leave it out of the dependency array and it will never change. So it's not a problem. In the case of a ref, you just have to make sure that you're not mutating or you're not expecting the callback to be run when the ref is mutated, because that by definition, that is what a ref is for. It's for being able to mutate something without triggering a re-render. And so that's, if you needed to trigger a re-render when that ref was updated, then what you want is state, not a ref. So that way you can trigger a re-render when that value is updated. Does that answer or fill in or create more questions?
No, that was a good explanation. Thanks.
Cool. Good. All right. Who's next? I know Steve and Andrew both have questions. I'll go ahead and answer Steve's because he's written that here in Discord right here about build your own React. So I have not taken this course or anything. I don't really know too much about it, but I mean, it looks pretty legit. And people probably like it. I don't know. I don't have too much feedback. I can say that years ago, when I was in the AngularJS community, there was this, what is his name? I think it was Toro, but I can't remember his last name. He was from one of the Nordic countries. I can't remember which either. Maybe Sweden. I can't remember. But great person, very smart. And he wrote a book called Build Your Own Angular. And I remember seeing a talk that he gave at NGNL, which was just phenomenal, where he kind of built his own Angular during the talk. He was actually the first time I ever saw somebody live code, except record the live coding portion and then hit play so that he wouldn't make any mistakes, which I thought was very clever. And it was just a very good talk. So I feel like building your own version of something is a great way to learn. Early when I was learning JavaScript in the first place, I had a friend, Merritt Christensen, who was teaching me. And he said a really good way to learn JavaScript is to take _JS, which this is before Lodash, and re-implement all of the methods that are in underscore. And that'd be a really great way to learn JavaScript. I never did it, but I feel like it would be a good idea. So yeah, if this is something you want to dive into, I've never gone through any material created by Rodrigo, but I have heard of Rodrigo, seen Rodrigo around the internet. I think he does some open source stuff too. So I think that this would be worth your time investigating. Yeah, for sure. But with a giant grain of salt of like, I don't know anything about this particular course.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right. Andrew, do you want to go ahead and ask your question now? I think that's all the Discord questions that we had up to this point, I believe. So I can't hear you, Andrew. Oh, okay, yeah. Are you still putting together the code example? Okay, cool. I'll answer Richard's question, unless anybody else in Zoom has a question. Okay.
Hi.
Yeah, hi.
Yeah. Client side open with the history module will be.
Test mic?
So,
Sorry, I can't. Andrew, yes, I can hear you now. Mokshid, I'm not. I couldn't hear you very clearly. Could you say that again?
yeah, I'm not. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sort of. It's a little bit distorted. It sounds like you're in a busy area or something. There's background noise.
This is the background noise as of now.
Yeah, sorry. I can't understand it. If you want to maybe chat it in Discord, that way, hopefully there's no background noise in Discord. Yeah, okay. I'll go ahead and go to the questions here on Discord with Richard. So working on a search page, filters are stored in the URL bar, and these filters are accessed in an object here. I'm using useEffect to update and run new search when any of the filters changes, but the dependency array hits an infinite loop. If I put filters in the dependency array, since each render, the filters object is a new object by reference. To get around this using stringify, yep, that's a common workaround to this problem. But normally there's a different way to do what you're trying to do that doesn't require stringify, but we'll see what we can do. Independency array, but it works, doesn't feel right. Should I spread the filters object in a dependency array? Yeah, it would be, Richard, it would be nice to get a little bit more code on this, because stuff like this is sometimes difficult to discuss in the abstract. But let's just say, here's our, here we go. Here's our effect. And you're trying, so in the effect, you are updating to update and run a new search when the filters change. So when the filters change, where I take it that the, okay, so let's take a step back. I have to make a couple of assumptions because I don't think I have quite enough information just from the question. And maybe this approach is not what you're doing, and this is maybe what you should be doing. The URL, if it stores any state at all, should be the source of truth for your state. Otherwise, you're trying to synchronize state between your UI and the URL, and that typically leads to problems just like the one that you're experiencing. And so if you, typically what you're going to do is you'll say history subscribe. I can't remember so like I would use React router. I'm guessing is what you're using. Oh, that's the remix docs for React router. I haven't gone to the regular React router docs in a long time. Where are the regular React router docs? Boy, they need to up their game on SEO. That is, where are the React router docs? I know it's on React training something. Man, that was, That's interesting. Anyway, so there is like a use history hook right here. And so the use history hook will give you the history that React Router is using. I'm guessing that's what you're using is React Router. So if we say use history, and then in here, you'll need to pass history, but I'm pretty sure this is, this will never change. I don't think they ever like change the history instance that they're using. That would be surprising. But in any case, you can say subscribe. Here, let's see if I can actually get types for this. Import use history from React Router. History, nope, rats. Does that come from React Router DOM? Yeah, it does. And I suppose that makes sense. Okay, so nope, still any. That's unfortunate. Anyway, I'm pretty sure it's a you get a subscribe on off of that.
It's a
And
listen,
so,
actually.
sorry.
It's history.listen.
Whoa. Please don't draw on my screen. How do I get rid of that stuff? Clear. Boy, too many clicks to do that. Yes, please don't draw on my screen. Okay. So we have history.subscribe, and here you're gonna subscribe to changes to the history. I'm pretty sure that it will include the query string, and in here you're going to say, okay, the filters changed, so now let's kick off the query to go update the elements or the things, the results or whatever. So with that, I don't think you're going to run into this problem because you're not listening for changes to the filter necessarily. Sorry. You doing okay there, Anna? Okay, yeah, so you're not listening to changes to the filter or some state that you're managing. You're actually deriving the state from the source of truth, which is the browser history. Without more code, I don't think I can give you much more of a recommendation than that, but yeah, that's the key principle there, is just to make sure that if state is being stored in the history, that should be the source of truth. And when you go and update it, you'd say history.push, and I believe that you probably wouldn't want this to be like pushed onto this the back stack, so like the back button. That would be super annoying to like choose a bunch of filters and then have to back to get out of all those. So you'll use the replace option. I think it'd be like whatever, and then here's your query string or filter is whatever the new thing is, and then you'd say replace true. Pretty sure that's what you'd want to do. And then when you do that, this subscribe callback is going to get called, and you can say, oh, sweet. So I see that the filter is different, and we'll go and update that, or go and get new stuff, for lack of a better term. We'll get the new values for whatever you needed to get based on that history change. So hopefully that helps without additional code. Maybe they have given me code by now. There it is. Hey there, Richard. Yeah, okay, so we've got use router. We've got the query right there. Okay, sweet. So, okay, that makes sense. That does help a lot. So you are getting the query directly from the URL. That's awesome. And I think that you might still explore this history subscribe option, because it seems to be more in line with what you're actually trying to accomplish. Maybe, I don't know, maybe just using use router with the query is going to be what you're looking for. Yeah, okay, so back to the original question of how do I get those filters into my use effect so I can key off. What I would suggest is if your filters are known, which it looks like they are, then just list those directly. So here, we're gonna get rid of all that. So use route, is that what it's called? Use router, yep. Query, and then you'd get the width and height is from query, and then React use effect, and then width and height. And that's what I would do. I find that sometimes we get like, even if there were a lot, so then it's like color and shade and price and whatever else. And so we get to the point where, oh man, there's just so much in here. I'm going to just forward all these onto the back end anyway. I don't want to have to list all of these out explicitly. So instead, we'll just say, filters. We'll just call the query filters. And so then we'll say query, which of course, that's not going to work out very well. For one, you're going to get an error here. Of course, that's also an object. So then you'd say, well, okay, so let's do query. So the benefit of doing something like this, which of course that's not going to work, you need to do the JSON stringify, but the benefit is now we can add whatever additional filters we want. We never need to worry about updating this code, because anytime that filter changes, we're going to get the use effect called. And so we don't have to bother coming back to this code to add new filters that we've added or something. I would personally say, who cares that you need to come back here and update the filters that are available. Anytime you add a new filter in a search like that, it's going to be more than just like a configuration change or something. You're going to want to have some UI to represent that. And in the process of doing that, you're going to manually test this, of course, and you're going to see, oh yeah, I need to add that. And that's not going to be a big problem. It's not going to lead to bugs. It's an easy problem to identify and fix. So yeah, I would recommend just going with destructuring all of the things and listing them explicitly in your use effect dependency array. Yeah, you'll end up being better off. If you really just don't want to do that, then a JSON stringify is probably fine. Or you could go with the history subscribe approach. That could also work. Yeah, between those options, I would go for destructure query first, be explicit. History subscribe would be second. Using JSON stringify is my last option on that. Or like you could also do your own comparison checking by getting rid of the dependency array altogether and then just doing your own comparison right here, which is actually what use deep compare effect does. I don't recommend using that either, even though I wrote it. Okay, sweet. Oh, okay. I need to look at this to get more context. So over 1,000 possible filters. Yeah, maybe. Let me retract my advice. I would not destructure 1,000 things. No, thank you. No, it's okay, Richard. That's fine. Yeah, I wouldn't bother with 1,000 possible filters. So given that additional context that I should have noticed earlier, so I apologize for that. I would suggest probably the history subscribe. One of the reasons that the React team didn't just like make it work with deep dependencies is performance characteristics. I don't think that it would be a big problem with even 1,000 filters to JSON stringify that. That'd probably be like pretty decently fast, but I think that could be a bottleneck in your rendering, because when you call that JSON stringify, even to put it in the dependency array, that's going to get called every render. Yeah, JSON stringify is not, I wouldn't say it's fast. It's not necessarily slow, but yeah, so I would probably avoid the JSON stringify solution, and I would go for the history thing. Yeah, you'd probably be better off that way. Yeah, fun. Yeah, that was a fun question.
Oh, I have a question on what you're just talking about. Just a quick clarification. Why do we have to stringify just on the stringify instead of just passing it as an object?
Yeah, because here, let me show some code. React use effect. So your dependency array has to be an array, so you can't just put the filters object right here. That won't work. that I believe you'll get a runtime error for that, or at least a warning. And so then the next logical thing is, well, okay, sure, put an array, just put the object as an element of the array. But the problem is that within React Router, filters is being assigned as a new object every render. And so because filters changes every render, you're going to effectively be calling this use effect every render, because it's like, oh, dependencies changed. And that's because it doesn't do a deep comparison. It actually does an object.is, which is equivalent to a triple equals. So it says, is the filters before the same as the filters after? No, they're different objects because they're defined during render. And so therefore I will run the use effect, even though the properties of that object never changed. The object itself is different. And so that's why we'll get that use effect running every time. However, if you use a JSON stringify, then this converts it into a string. And if the object is the same every time, then, or sorry, if the properties of the object are the same every time, then the stringified version should be the same. And so you won't run into, even though the objects are different, the string is the same. And so you won't call the use effect callback. So that's why that has, like, some people use that as a solution, and it can be a reasonable one if you don't have a lot to stringify. But yeah, 1,000 filters, you'd probably still be okay. I don't know, it'd be something worth measuring, I'd say. But yeah, in general, you want to avoid that.
I'll paste some code examples, because I kind of, depending on something similar in one of my projects, like there's an object helpers which I get from a Redux store, and then I depend on that. I run an effect when the helpers change. So that helpers like an object, so just a JavaScript object. Does that also apply, like that? It's I get that from global state, but it is, I just pasted the code snippet there. If you look at the helpers that I'm depending on, I get it from state.
Yeah, well, so it kind of depends. If it's from state, then you're probably fine.
Not local state like Redux, and it's passed as a prop, so it comes as an object.
Yeah, well, so what this is going to do is anytime the helpers changes, then it's going to trigger a re-render of use effect. I'd need to see how helpers is defined and to really give you any insight. But if it's coming out of Redux, then my guess is that it's only, helpers is only going to be changed when like the value, it will only change when the properties inside of it also are changed. And so you're probably okay, but it's hard to say for sure without seeing more of the code.
Oh, okay, so it's being sent as a prop from maybe a parent component or something.
Yeah. So one way that you can test this, if you're like, I'm not sure, is you can do something like this. Have a use reducer where this just returns a new object every time. So it's just a function that returns an object. And that effectively turns this dispatch function into a force re-render. And then you put that on a button that you render. So you say button on click, oops, force re-render, re-render. And then you have a React use effects. So this is the one that you have. So you'd have this thing. And at the top of that, you'd say console.log called. And so every time you click on this button, it's going to change some state, but it's not going to change the state that you care about. And so if your use effect is, if you're seeing this console log, then you know that your use effect is getting called, even though you didn't change any of the state that it depends on. And so, yeah, that's how you know that it's being called more than it should be. So that's a quick and easy way to test that. And I noticed they just dropped off the call. So hopefully they see that in the recording. So, okay, sweet. coming back here, I don't want to skip Sean's question. Just went through the testing portion of the course. Hooray! Already been testing using MSW. Congrats. Do you have a recommendation? Avoid re-implementing the logic within your APIs. I believe we talked about this last week, right, Peter? Did you listen last week? I feel like you were here.
I don't remember what was the answer.
Yeah. I talked about it for like 10 minutes about the trade-offs and stuff. Yeah, and also suggestions how to test Safari for E2E. Playwright supports testing on WebKit. Yeah, so I don't have any feedback on this testing in Safari specifically. Safari is a tricky one for sure, but I don't have any specific advice on that. Let me think. Yeah, I don't have anything. Sorry. Yeah, so for avoiding re-implementing logic, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I think if you look at my last week, or you just scroll up a little bit, they asked the question in Discord, and you can find when it was that I answered this question. But I'll just give you a brief version of this. So every time when you're testing something, you're trying to automate what a manual tester would do. And a manual tester is going to open your app, they're going to log in, they're going to interact with the app and everything. And if you wanted to speed that manual tester up, then you might make it so they don't have to log in. So you'd have a special thing to enable that, like maybe a Chrome extension or something, so that they don't have to log in. And then, well, what if you wanted to get them into a specific state? Okay, so we'll have another special thing like a query param or something to get them into a specific state. And this is all just so that you can speed up the process for the manual tester, right? We do the very, every time you do something like that, the manual tester is getting further and further away from what a real user experiences when they're testing the application. But we do it to make it practical, right? To make the manual tester more effective and efficient with their time, because we just don't have enough time to test everything as like every single user would. Unless you happen to be testing in production, just let your users be the testers, which if you set it up right, it can actually work out okay if you're at the right scale. I believe Netflix does this heavily, where they release things slowly and then they just track key indicators of like error rates and stuff. And if there's problems, then they just revert automatically. It's like amazing. It's very interesting. But if you're not at that scale, or you don't want any of your users to deal with that, then yeah, we have to acknowledge that it's just impossible for us to have 100% like our users use the software tests. It's just not possible. And so we make trade-offs, and we give the manual tester these tools. Well, we also don't want to have manual testers as much as possible. I mean, manual testers are great. Sorry, we love manual testers, but we they're human and they are limited, and so we want the computer to do it. And that's another step away from the way that software is really used. And so, but we're doing it for practical reasons. And then we find that like there are problems with using a real production environment. Like you wouldn't actually want to do this in prod because, well, now we're adding a bunch of koala bears to our cart, and then we're checking out, and it's very expensive to run these tests. And now I've got a closet full of koala bear or koalas in my closet. So this is not going to work. So, okay, so now let's mock out the third-party credit card vendor, so we don't have to spend the money, and let's mock out the endpoint for actually shipping. And every single step of this way, we're mocking out things, we're re-implementing those things as a mocked version, and maybe it's not as complex, right? I don't actually have to charge a credit card with my mock version, so it's not as complex, but I do have to re-implement it re-implement the API. And so like, as we're stepping through all of this, we're just getting, we're making trade-offs for practicality. That's what we're winning out of this, is just so we can actually get some confidence in our code that we've written. We lose some confidence in our integration. And so that's why we want to focus on making sure the mock resembles the same API, so that we get a little bit of that confidence back. But that's difficult to do. You just have to kind of manually keep track of API changes and stuff and make sure your mocks resemble the APIs. But we're just doing this for practicality. We do the same thing for our own APIs. You mock out your own APIs, not just third-party APIs. In some cases, to make the test run faster, or if our own API isn't finished yet, but we have finished the UI or some. There are various reasons that you mock out your even internal APIs, and that can definitely feel like you're re-implementing the logic of the backend. But you don't have to do that completely. For lots of us, we're just talking about like REST or some sort of resource-based APIs, and there are libraries that you can write, or actually libraries that have been written to do this. And MSW recently released their data package that helps with this a lot. And so you can use that to kind of simulate the same sort of API without having to re-implement the whole thing. So it doesn't have to be as fidelity. That's the word I've been like searching for. It doesn't have to have the same fidelity as the real APIs, but anything, and so you don't have to do all the validation logic and everything that they do. But like if you wanted to test the validation logic, then yeah, you probably need to simulate that same validation stuff. Or if you want to test what happens on the UI when the server sends back an error, then yeah, your mock is going to need to send back the same error. So yeah, you do end up re-implementing a fair amount of things, but just for the stuff that you're specifically testing. And there's no way to get around this. You either do this, or you just hire an army of manual testers, or you get Netflix scale and call your users your testers. Not to suggest that Netflix doesn't test. I'm sure that they do. But I just heard once that that's a thing that they do, which I think is so cool. It's very interesting. I don't know if I've ever been subject to the errors that that trigger a rollback, but I kind of hope that that's happened once. It feels like an honor. Okay, anyway, hopefully that answers your question. Good luck with that. Okay, so yeah, Andrew, I know you're in here. You had a question. Are you ready?
I am. Is my mic working? Yeah, it looks like it.
Yeah.
Hello.
Do you want to share your screen?
Yes. Although my screen is an absolute mess, so I will just share VS Code. There we go. I actually think I managed to figure this out in the time it's taken me to actually write this up.
That's why actually this is the big secret for open source maintainers and stuff. We always ask for a reproduction because half of the time you'll figure it out by the time you're done.
So it kind of happened like halfway through, and it was to do with aborting a promise. I'm not using the abort controller, which is what I would normally fall back on. And the idea that I first implemented was on the application, I had an effect that returned a piece of state that would abort, and then I would pass that through into the information. I would go into the async callback, and then it would basically check to see whether abort was not true. Well, yeah. It's been a long day. And then it would call the dispatch, and that wasn't the way to go. And I was just gonna rhyme off what I think it was, but maybe it's better.
Yeah. No, I'd love for you to describe why you don't think it works.
I imagine because I'm passing this in, when this entire component unmounts, there's no way to guarantee that state update will complete and be passed through to here before the component is unmounted. So this abort value would never change from false to true.
That's one reason. I'm not sure how that would work. And actually, I'm not sure what React does with the state update that happens during unmount. So actually, and in addition, if you scroll down a little bit, one other potential issue with this is the scroll down a little further where you have the set state or should abort. Yeah. If you put that in the app, then you would only get that state updating when the app is getting unmounted, but not when the Pokemon info is unmounted. So if there was some logic that said Pokemon info gets removed from the page, then yeah you're toast.
Nice. Yeah.
But in any case, for one, like I said, I don't know what React does with a state update that happens during unmounting. I feel like there would be an error or a warning or something, because I don't, yeah, I'm not sure what it would do. But the foundational problem is actually totally unrelated to React and just kind of a JavaScript issue. And so we're passing the abort value of a Boolean to Pokemon info. And if you go back up to where you're using that value, where you say not abort, yeah, I think a little further. Yep, there we go. So where you're using that value, that closure that you're passing to use effect, that function creates a closure over that abort value. And there's, so that abort, and maybe Peter can help me make sure I use the words all correctly with like assigning things. So if this is actually related to, now that I think about it, blog posts where, let me find it. Where did I? Oh yeah, JavaScript pass by value function parameters. That is a weird title. JavaScript pass by value function parameters. I need to retitle that. That is confusing. Maybe I'd never even, I think I retitled it and just confused. I don't know. That's weird.
Yeah,
anyway,
it was something about closures first. Then you decided that it's not about closures.
Yeah, exactly. So what's going on here is actually, I was just about to talk about closures again, and it's not about closures. It's not. So on line 49, where you have use async, you're accepting a value called abort. That value is a Boolean, and in our case, it's false. And so we're creating a variable or a reference that we title abort. You can call that whatever you want. It could be, not abort to make people very confused. But whatever it is, you get to call it because you're basically creating a variable that's pointing to the Boolean of false. And anywhere inside of this function, you could reassign that abort to anything, but you wouldn't want to do that, right? Because you want the parent to be able to say, hey, now we're unmounting, we need you to abort. And so actually, it just occurred to me there, you may be able to make this work in a bit of a hacky way, but we'll keep going with this. So yeah, so because you're not reassigning it, that value will always stay the same. Even no matter what happens outside of this function, that value will remain the same forever. Even if you you set that variable differently when you call should abort with true, what that's doing is it's creating a brand new variable. And it like I said, I'm not sure what would happen during an unmount, but if this component was still mounted, if it got re-rendered or something, and we got and we called use async, we're calling that again, and that's a separate, a totally separate operation that's going on in memory. Our original abort value will remain false, false, and so it will have no effect over here. None of this code will ever see abort as true. So how do we solve this for real if we wanted to yeah, so this is super hacky. Don't do it this way. But one thing that you could do that I think would work is you'd put a React use effect, or actually you've got one already on line 89. If you just add a new line and return a function that sets abort to true, that just assigns abort to true, then I believe that would work. This is not recommended, but yeah, this would work. And in fact, this leads us to an acceptable solution here, and that is, well, okay, sorry, let me backtrack. It's not quite acceptable because if the async callback were to, well, okay, man, I need to share my screen. Can I do that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. There are a couple of solutions to this, and they all have trade-offs. I want to describe those. Okay, so we have this React. Whoops. You know what? Let me open up the exact same example, so we're kind of working with the same code. Okay, we're on. Oh, and I'm gonna see. Was it? Nope, that's
2.
There we go. Okay, sweet. All right, so this is the solution that I have, but we'll work with a different, go with a different solution. So I'll start on extra credits too. Okay, so we want to make it so that we don't call dispatch when we don't want to trigger a re-render. And actually, I think your code was at the phase where we pass the async callback. Okay, so this is where we're at. Yeah, actually, I think that you were on extra credit 3, but your extra credit 2 solution is a little different because I used the use callback here instead. Anyway, we're on like a different spot, but we'll just go from here. So if we were to say, let's see, what do you think? Yeah, this is actually a fairly common pattern. If we say let current equal true, and then in here, if we say current dispatch, whoops, otherwise null or whatever, or void. Does that work? Yeah, that's cool. Oh, hold on a second. Why is this complaining? Because here, let's just do this. If current, there we go. That's better. Okay, so then if current, then that. Okay, so now we have a variable that we've defined in our own use effect that says, if this is the current request, the latest one, the latest use effect call, then we'll go ahead and call this dispatch. And then we can set that this is no longer the current by returning a cleanup function that will say current is false. And so what this is going to do is it's going to say anytime this async callback changes, and when this component that is using this hook gets unmounted, I want to set current to false. And now, because this value, or sorry, because this variable is being closed over by both of these closures that we've defined here, when these are called, we have actually been able to reset what that value is set to. And so this is effective, and kind of makes me think that it's a better solution. It's a common pattern, and the benefit of this is not only do you not call dispatch when the component's unmounted, but you also won't call dispatch if you get an additional like an additional render that changes the async callback. So like somebody, the situation where this is really beneficial is, yeah, I think I actually may change this exercise to this solution. Let's say that I say, let me go get Charizard. Oh, never mind. Let me get Pikachu instead. And Pikachu comes back first because Charizard is just bigger or something. And then Charizard comes. So before, what would happen before this change, and even with the final version, as it occurs to me now, with the way that we have things structured now, what would happen is Pikachu would show up, be like, hi there. And then Charizard would come barreling and say, actually, never mind. You wanted me first and I'm coming whether you like it or not. So that's not what we wanted, right? We said, hey, let's get Charizard. Never mind. Let's get Pikachu. So we only want Pikachu. And so, yeah, by doing it this way, that does come with the trade-off, though, of saying, let's say that it takes 2 minutes just for this data to come back. So we say, hey, go get Charizard. And then a minute later, we decide, oh, never mind. Let's get Pikachu instead. With this, or with the previous solution, if there was no race condition, what would happen is Charizard would come and we'd be able to look at Charizard's happy face for a minute, and then Pikachu would come, which you might argue is a better user experience potentially. But I think that's not a significant enough trade-off to say that this isn't actually better. Because with this solution, what would happen is we'd say, okay, go get me Charizard. A minute later, we decide, never mind, get me Pikachu. Now we have to wait a full 2 minutes before we see anything. We're not going to see Charizard anymore, which I think is an acceptable trade-off. That it seems like it would be pretty rare for that to be a problem. And it's more common that race conditions would be a problem. So yeah, you were going down the right path, but it's just really important to remember that once you get a value here, it doesn't matter what happens outside of that as far as like how those values are reassigned, or if this function gets called again. the first time this was called, it's always going to be set to that. The difference, and I think I talk about this in this blog post, but the difference would be if this value were a ref, and then you'd say value ref dot current. So like, or rather abort ref or something, because then you can mutate that ref. And because we both have we have different pointers or different variables, but they're both pointing to the same thing. And so if this one mutates that thing, then this other one will see that mutation. And so you could do what you were doing just with a ref, and that would actually work. And the final solution kind of goes with that approach, just more generically, rather than having to change the app. We have this special hook that just keeps track of the mounted state of the component, and then we use that. So here's the part where it's keeping track of the mounted state, and then we create our own dispatch function that will reference that mounted state of the component. So it's kind of two different ways to solve this problem. And I think that in the next version of Epic React, I'll probably go with using the current. I've done that before, like even like very early in hooks, this became a relatively common pattern. And I don't know why I didn't just go with that solution originally, because it does come with that nice benefit of race conditions just aren't a problem. Yeah, I don't have anything else to say, but does that answer your question, Andrew?
That is incredibly helpful. Thank you. I was a little bit worried I wasn't going to understand what was going on, but that makes perfect sense.
Cool. Good. Yes. Peter, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I posted a link to some like further analysis and with an example of abort controller. So when dealing with promises, when dealing with fetch can take abort controller. So there is the middle one here. There's an example with abort controller that might be useful for some cases. But yeah, your solution is more general case for avoiding the race conditions. I was addressing more the memory leaks, like to get rid of the dispatch completely. So like not to hang on to the dispatch at all.
Yeah, exactly. That, and I feel like there was an office hours a few weeks ago where we kind of discussed the trade-offs of using abort controller. So I'll just sum it up briefly. Abort controller, I think, is the right way to solve this problem. It brings its own problems though. There are two in particular I can think of. So one is it's impossible to abort a promise chain. So that's super annoying, man. And so you do have to catch. So when you say signal.abort, controller.abort, then the promise is not just like ignored and go away in the ether, but instead it goes through the rejection chain of your promise, which I hate. So that's one aspect of it. The other is, and this is, I think the React team said this at one point, but they said it actually can be nice to not abort because then that's loaded into your browser's cache. So for example, let's say I want Charizard, and then we decide, oh, never mind, I want Pikachu. And then I say, oh, never mind, I actually do want Charizard. So when you come back and say, oh, never mind, I do want Charizard, assuming that the server has set up its cache headers properly, Charizard should just be in the cache already and should be a very quick response. So that's kind of, whereas if you use abort controller, the browser will be like, oh, okay, never mind, I'll just throw that all away. I won't even bother parsing the JSON or anything. So it's trade-offs. It's just trade-offs. And so that's part of why I didn't teach the abort controller solution. And then on top of all of that, we get into using React Query later. And so none of this really matters all that much other than just understanding a little bit of how React Query works under the hood. And React Query supports you adding an abort to the promise, just monkey patching it on, which is hacky, but I love it. So, so anyway, that was a fun discussion. We're down on our time, and my wife got her second dose of the vaccine last night, and she is not feeling great. So the kids are just watching PBS right now. So I'm gonna try and wrap this up so I can go hang out with them for the rest of the day.
Hey.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, go for it. Oh, sorry. I was sharing my screen. Go for it.
Is my screen visible?
I see a Chrome browser and a lot of, oh, there we go.
Yeah. So in the last session, you recommended storing the state in the history state for client-side routing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So that worked great. So you can see it is a basic demo. It's doing the client-side routing.
Sorry, I'm not sure what I'm looking at. Are you asking a question or just demoing a feature?
Yeah, I'm asking a question regarding it.
Okay.
So yeah, when I'm routing, you can see it's fetching the data from this route.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The URL is actually something like you can do something like this. So question mark href and then the current route. Right.
Okay.
Now the thing is that when I'm pre-rendering it, it also supports static site generation. So I can't write a slash to the file system. Because the file system doesn't support having a / in the file name.
Okay.
Yeah, so I tried URL encoding it, but I have to encode it twice so that first encoding is for the file system and the second one is for the server to interpret it and not take the symbols as if they go. So yeah, I'm having to encode it twice. So is there any better way to do it?
Okay, so this fetch route data is on the client and you say you have to encode it twice.
Yeah, the question mark and the /s.
Oh, wait, why do you need to encode the question mark portion of that?
Yeah, I'll just show that. So when I pre-render it, you can see it generates an out directory with all the pages that are pre-rendered.
Okay.
Yeah, so for client-side routing, there is also going to be a data folder, and in that I can store some JSON files, which the browser can fetch before doing the routing.
Why do you need the JSON files? Can they not be built into the HTML output?
That would work with server routing, but it won't work with client-side routing, right? When I'm doing the client-side routing, it will just right.
I see. That makes sense.
Yeah. See.
Okay, so what are the JSON files called?
Currently, the JSON files are based on the route. So the name could be something like data href is equal to suppose the pages /post, and then I encode this twice.
Okay, so what is the file name? Does it look like that just encoded twice?
Yeah, and then on the server, if the user has chosen normal server-side routing, then I decode it twice in the server. Yeah, here I decode it twice. So is there a better way to do it?
Well, because every single one of them has a data question mark on them.
The question mark isn't required. The main part that is required is just the current URL, like /post/1/2,
right.
something
So
like that.
is there a reason it can't just be data /post/2.json?
Then I would have to create these folders, right? There would be a data folder, then a post folder, and then one.json, right?
Right. Is that a problem?
Could try it actually. Yeah, that would work, I think.
That's probably what I would do.
Okay, I'll try that.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm
gonna
gonna
answer the client-side routing one. That would be
cool. Good luck. I'm sorry if you have another question. I'm gonna try and finish up these so I can go hang out with my family. So Okay, Yusuf has a question. I'll share my screen so we're all looking at the same thing. Company expected to grow significantly. Congrats. Rebuild the whole app and redeploy the whole app. That sounds like almost everybody does what we're all doing, especially, yeah, well, yeah. Structure the React app in such a way to avoid rebuilding and redeploying the whole app just because something changed somewhere in the app. You're talking about like micro front ends. It's kind of what this is. Maybe a way to combine multiple React apps into one. Yep, that's micro front ends. It is possible for sure. Yeah, so here's what I would suggest. First off, unless your company, so the size of the company doesn't matter quite as much as the size of the app or the domains of the app, right? So if your app does just one thing, let's say that you are just the Twitter feed or something, or maybe even just like the main Twitter app, I don't see there'd be a whole lot of reason to split that up. You know, you'd have maybe a lot of people working on the same repo. They're probably working on all their different areas of the app for different features that they're working on. So you're not really going to run into merge conflicts a whole lot. The one challenge with that is like versions of dependencies and different stuff like that can be hard to coordinate. But there's really good arguments for keeping everybody on the same version anyway, just for caching reasons and stuff like that for the user. So I would resist the urge to go full on micro architecture for your app. Yeah, I would recommend against that, going that direction prematurely. It can be useful though. Talking about the size of the app, not the company size. Yeah. I mean, I've worked on really big code bases with that, you know, were a full app. And I don't think that they would have been benefited much by splitting it up. In fact, once you go down that path, it is just very complex. Adds a lot of complexity to just the whole process. So I would make 100% certain that you are actually experiencing pain and an actual cost before you reach for a really complex solution to solve this problem. That said, what you're saying is totally possible and people are doing it. Yeah, like there are a couple of approaches. You could either just literally have different apps, and this is what PayPal did. Every single team had their own app. And if you wanted to get from one to the other, the user would do just a full page refresh and now they're on this other app. And like, we've always been doing that, like forever. That's how things have worked. And that's very simple relative to a micro front ends approach. But it's not a super great user experience because they're navigating to totally different apps. They're downloading React like 30 times, however many apps they go to, you know, all of that. It's not awesome, but it's very simple. And so then the alternative is to have micro front ends where you have this router, like single SPA is kind of the de facto standard for this. And it's responsible for routing to these different sub applications. And yeah, I've never used it, but in my mind, that just seems very complicated or adds a lot of complexity to your the whole thing. And so I would avoid reaching for that unless you really needed the ability to just everybody be on the same single page app, but also be able to work completely independently from one another. So that's, yeah, those are my thoughts on that. Okay, with Swagger docs that are pretty extensive, do you know of libraries generate mock APIs? Yeah, I don't know of anything, but Swagger is like, that's pretty common. Yeah, I'm sure that there is something out there, and if there's not, then this is a great opportunity to make a huge contribution to the open source world because yeah, it's very common to have like generative APIs. So yeah, give that a shot. Good luck. Want an article on React Fiber work with hooks? maybe, I don't know. I write things about what I am jazzed about. And that doesn't excite me right now. So it probably won't come from me. Sorry. And you're welcome. Okay, just had a look, work with the next router. Yeah, as path. Oh. Yeah, I would recommend. Yeah, that's interesting. So if you really wanted to go with this approach, then I would not use filters right here. And instead, you could go with as path, but I would parse the as path myself. And you can actually do that pretty easily with URL. What is it called? URL search params. That's it. Search params. Just pass the query string to URL search params, and now you have all the params and whatever. Yeah, that's probably what I would do if you went with the as path. But that is a pretty reasonable solution. Yeah, just don't get in the habit of ignoring the ESLint rule right there. That is a path to sadness and bugs. Yeah, totally. Thank you. Yep, very good. Current is scoped to that call of use async, and the mounted ref is for the first mount and unmount. No. Yes, that's correct, Iago. So we're referencing the previous where we were setting a variable called current. So yeah, the use safe dispatch had an effect that tracked the current mounted state. But we don't actually really care about whether the thing's mounted. We just care about whether this is the current request that's being made. And then in addition, just kind of as a little helpful additional feature, that cleanup is going to get called also when we're getting unmounted. And so technically it's no longer the current request because there is no current request. Maybe there would be a better variable name other than current, like, I don't know. That's just always what I've used is current. If somebody can think of a better variable name, I mean, you could just say like should update, but that's not very descriptive either. So, all right. Thanks for the questions and stuff. This was fun. I'm going to go take care of my wife and my kids, and we're going to have a good day.